Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Tina was a local village heroine. Not only was she beautiful, but she also graduated high school with honors and passed her final exams excellently. And she entered the International Relations University in the capital on a scholarship. For the villagers living in a distant corner of a remote province, such news was almost like a miracle. Did you hear that Tina got into one of the best universities in the country? God gifted the girl. He kissed her right on the forehead. I guess there were no such clever people in their family. All the people were ordinary: mother, father, grandparents. They worked in the collective farm all their lives, and look at her. Nature has unexpectedly given her a talent. Talk and gossip went on in the village for months, ever since the cherished letter from the university arrived at the beginning of September. The envelope arrived very late. The mail always reached them in the very last turn. First, all letters were brought to the central post office of the district. The mail was sorted there, and only after that was delivered to the villages. The letters also arrived late at the district's central post office because it was the most remote district in the region. There were no telephones in the small village at that time. There was no pharmacy. And in general, there was almost nothing except a small grocery store where they could get matches, laundry soap, some canned goods, and other consumer products. For any need, they went to the neighboring town 12 kilometers away, sometimes even on foot. Children were taken to school by an old car. 3 boys and 1 girl, Tina. That was all the village school children. An elderly English teacher in a secondary school got a cherished dream of any teacher in the person of this quiet little girl, a real diligent student. The one who really wants to master the subject and also has the talent, persistence, and diligence. For 20 years of working in a rural school, Yvonne Poletto had never seen the slightest desire in the children to learn a foreign language. Most of them were in no hurry to properly master even their mother tongue. They just didn't care. But this girl, she was special. She was completely different from the other students whom the teacher had to force to at least learn the minimum required to transfer to the next grade. In the 4th grade, during her first year of learning a foreign language, Tina listened to the teacher's explanations with her mouth open. She was mesmerized. As soon as the bell rang, all the other students immediately left the classroom with lightning speed, but not Tina. Tina remained seated at her desk, as if she hadn't heard the bell ringing, announcing the end of the lesson. Tina, Yvonne said softly, the lesson is over. You can go. But the girl didn't even move from her seat. She raised her big surprised eyes and asked timidly, is it true? What? The teacher didn't understand. Is it true that there are people somewhere who speak differently from us? Tina clarified her bewilderment. Of course, it is true, Yvonne nodded. There are many countries and other languages in the world. I thought it was only in a fairy tale. Tina sighed in admiration, and the teacher realized that foreign language sounded like a magic spell to this child, like a key that opens a door to another world. And so it was. The language barrier is the biggest obstacle for a person who happens to be in a foreign country. Suddenly the teacher got a sudden inspiration, and he said, sitting next to the girl, the English language will open up the whole world for you, Tina, if you will know it as your mother tongue. But will I be able to learn it? Tina looked at him incredulously. I will help you, the teacher promised. But you have to work hard, try your best, okay? Yes, she nodded seriously. I understand. I will do my best. Since then, they both worked very hard, teacher and student. Yvonne, inspired by the efforts of his student, on his days off, went to a regional center, looked for the necessary textbooks, took foreign language books from the library, and did everything possible to give Tina as much knowledge as possible. The capable student fully met the expectations of her teacher. Eventually, he saw that his efforts were not in vain. His talent for teaching, wasted for years in this godforsaken rural place, was finally being fulfilled. In 7th grade, Yvonne had a serious conversation with Tina's parents. I think your daughter needs extra lessons with a native speaker. With who? Her mother didn't understand. with a teacher for whom English is native or almost native. Well, we live in a remote village. Where would we find such a person? The woman shrugged her shoulders. There is such a person in the neighboring town, and he is already retired. I am ready to take Tina to him on weekends. Tina's mother was confused. She wanted to say, "Hey man, are you out of your mind? A two-way railroad ticket to that town costs a lot of money." But the authority of the teacher and, in general, of the school was strong at that time, and she didn't dare to speak in such a manner. She only said, blushing and turning away her eyes, that their family had no money for such trips. "And I don't think Tina's father will allow it," she added, sighing. Tina's father was a man with a tough temper, and after a few drinks, it was better not to talk to him at all. And actually, he was very angry about Tina's consistently staying late at school. "What the hell?" he said glumly. "Why the hell is she even learning a foreign language? Can't the cows in our village understand your native language? Come on, Roberto." Tina's mother tried to soften her husband's anger. "They don't even charge us for it. Let her study what she wants to study." "Exactly," Tina's father said indignantly. "They're not charging us yet. My gut tells me this is where it's going. I won't give them a penny, do you understand? Not a single penny. It's nonsense. You'd better teach the girl how to do household chores. She won't need English in our village for sure, but she will have to work physically." He cursed and left, slamming the heavy door. "I'll talk to him," Yvonne said calmly. "And don't worry about the money, the district administration will pay for it. It's a scholarship for a talented student. Tina won the regional competition 3 times. Well, if they would really pay for it, then okay," her mother said. That was the end of the conversation. However, when Tina's father found out that she and Yvonne would be going to the neighboring town once a week, he became as furious as an angry bull, but her mother stoically withstood all his raging attacks and sent her daughter to her grandmother's house just in case. The family storm subsided and ended with an alcoholic lull at a neighbor's house where Roberto always went to drink. Tina's mother, who was used to such behavior, didn't object. But she never let her drunken husband into the house until he sobered up. After drinking heavily, he always came back silent and calm, and for the next couple of weeks, there was peace at home. The first lesson with Sebastian Flores was like a dream. An old gray-haired teacher had worked for many years as a simultaneous interpreter in the capital at a foreign embassy, but now, in his old age, he had returned to his native land, leaving the apartment in the capital to his son. "You have to change your pronunciation," this new teacher told her. "Yvonne has taught you good grammar, and your vocabulary is good, but your pronunciation, it's terrible." "I'm sorry, colleague," Sebastian embarrassingly turned to the schoolteacher, sitting a little farther away. "That's okay, Sebastian," he said calmly. "I understand everything perfectly well, that's why I brought Tina to you. And you made the right decision. Absolutely right. Together we will be able to prepare this young lady for enrollment in one of the best universities in the capital." He smiled and looked at the blushing Tina. "Don't doubt it, Tina, you are very talented and very hardworking. Together, we're gonna succeed. All right, we're done for today, don't miss your train." "Yvonne," Tina said cautiously on the way back when they were already sitting in the carriage, looking at the monotonous landscape passing by. "Do you really think I can be accepted?" "Yes, of course," the teacher answered her. "There's a chance, very good chance. Now your pronunciation will be handled by a person of such a high level, so you are destined for success." Tina didn't say anything but just sat silently looking out of the window. Such a prospect seemed unreal to her. At home, no one supported the girl, her father was totally against it. And her mother, who secretly wanted her only daughter to have a better life, did not give her any reason for hope. Because her life experience told her that youthful hopes were not destined to come true. However, despite a hard life and unfulfilled dreams, she tried not to make her daughter feel bad about her future. So she simply kept quiet and remained neutral. Returning to the village after her first lesson with a new teacher, Tina found unexpected support in the person of her elderly grandmother. "Let's go to my place for the night, dear," Nora invited her. "Let's warm up in the steam room and then have a cup of tea. I've made cranberry pie." Tina loved to spend the night at her grandmother's house. There was no constant rebuke from her annoyed father in this small, cozy house. There was no arguing, no yelling. She would have loved to live at her grandmother's, but she couldn't leave her unfortunate mother alone. Besides, her father was angry when Tina spent too much time at her grandmother's. "Are you not well at home?" he asked his daughter angrily. "It's warm at home, always enough food, and you even have your own room. What else do you need?" "No, I'm happy at home, Dad. It's just that Grandma needs help too," Tina answered him guiltily. "So help her during the day, and in the evening, you have to be at home, do you understand?" her father said indignantly. That's why it was not possible to visit Grandma Nora too often. But today was a rare moment when her father was in a good mood. So he didn't object when Tina timidly asked to spend the night at her grandmother's house. Their houses stood side by side under a big birch, where Tina's swing, blackened from time, hung on an old thick branch. But the swing was still good. Only once her father had changed the thick ropes, but the board was still the same as when she was a child. In the summer, Tina would often sit on this swing and learn complicated and confusing English tenses. "Tina, darling," her grandmother said to her late in the evening when they were sitting at the table drinking herbal tea after the steam room. "Don't give up your studies." Tina looked at her grandmother incredulously. "What do you mean? Don't give up?" The grandmother continued firmly. "If you succeed, you can go to the big city and have a chance for a decent life. The village is dying. Young people are leaving for the city. Look who's left here. Only the elderly, or the most stupid and lazy, who don't know how to do anything at all. The city will not accept them. But you're a smart girl. So, study. I'll give you money for the trip when it's time to go to the capital. I've got some money in my savings account. I don't need much money for life, so I saved some money for you." She stroked her granddaughter's cheek affectionately. "My darling." Tina even cried seeing her grandmother's tenderness, and hope settled in her soul. If even her grandmother believes in her and is willing to give all her savings, then Tina is ready to conquer the scary and inaccessible university. And so, 3 years after that memorable conversation, it was time to go to the capital. "Don't be afraid of anything," Yvonne, who volunteered to accompany his best student on this long journey, encouraged her. "You know everything very well. Don't be afraid, answer the questions calmly. Imagine you're not at the university, but answering Sebastian's questions. Remember that you have an advantage over others, your excellent grades. It's gonna work. Good luck." After that, Tina only remembered the exam sheets printed on beautiful branded paper. But she absolutely didn't remember the moment when she was answering questions asked by the best professors in the country. She didn't remember their faces except for one. It was a brown-eyed man with a mustache in the center of the table. He nodded approvingly after Tina's answers and asked without smiling or showing any emotion, "Where did you study? What kind of program?" Tina said what she could. The examiner raised one eyebrow slightly and clarified, "Your teacher's last name is Flores?" I don't know," Tina answered frustratedly and felt like she was a little stupid child. She almost cried there. "All right, you can go." The teacher turned away indifferently, preparing to listen to the next applicant. Yvonne, who was nervously walking back and forth in the university square, saw Tina and rushed to her. "Tina, how did it go?" "They asked me what Sebastian's last name was," Tina said in a trembling voice. And she finally burst into tears on her kind teacher's shoulder, letting out her emotions. "It's okay, don't cry." Yvonne comforted her. "I'm sure this question won't make any difference. Let's just wait for the results." The exam results were posted the next day, and Tina had a high score. The passing score will be calculated after the second round of exams. It was announced to everyone at the final meeting. We will put the lists of accepted students at the end of August, or send it by mail if you live in another city. In the evening, Tina and Yvonne went home to wait in hope. When the long-awaited envelope arrived from the district center, only her father was at home. Tina and her mother went for mushrooms across the river to a distant forest. "Look, here's a letter for you." Roberto cheerfully handed the envelope to his daughter as soon as the door closed behind them. Probably a rejection from the university. He laughed at his cruel joke. But Tina got angry, blushed, grabbed the envelope, and ran out of the house, ignoring her father's angry shouts. She was lucky there was a bus at the bus stop, and she didn't have to walk for kilometers to the highway, where she could catch a bus to school. The school building was quiet. It was the end of summer and the students weren't there yet. Today there was no one here except the cleaning lady and a few teachers. "Did you see Yvonne today?" Tina asked the janitor. "I don't think so," she said absent-mindedly, looking at the newspaper. The girl rushed to the second floor and pulled the door, but it was closed. Tina clenched her teeth in frustration and ran out of the school as quickly as she could. When she reached Yvonne's house, located on the highest hill on the outskirts of the village, her heart was about to jump out of her chest. "Here," was all she could say as she put the crumpled envelope on the table. "The mailman delivered it this morning." The teacher looked at the envelope and immediately opened it. There was Tina's last name and initials. "We are sending you a list of applicants who have successfully passed the entrance exams and have been enrolled in the first year of the National University of International Relations." Yvonne ran his eyes over the list and went lower down the list. The names were not in alphabetical order, but according to their scores. "Look." He solemnly handed the sheet to Tina. At the bottom. With a sinking heart, the girl found her last name almost at the end of the long list. "Did I really get accepted?" she asked incredulously, raising her eyes to the teacher. The lines blurred in front of her eyes, and she felt dizzy. "Yes," Yvonne shouted, and grabbing Tina by the shoulders, began to dance wildly. "You are accepted. You are. I told you could do this." Tina laughed and cried, and couldn't even utter a word. But suddenly, she stopped in fright. "Yvonne, it says that classes start on September 4th. I'm not gonna make it to the city in time." "You will," the teacher said firmly. "Go home and pack quickly, and I'll go to the train station to get tickets. Don't take anything extra, just the essentials. And one more thing," he gave her an envelope. "It's not much, but it should be enough for a while." "What is it?" The girl looked at the envelope in bewilderment and immediately realized that it was money and tried to refuse. "I can't take it, Yvonne, I can't take it." "Take it. It'll come in handy." The teacher looked at her with tenderness. "You're like a daughter to me." The next day her family and friends saw Tina off. Her elderly grandmother, who couldn't go to the train station herself, also gave her an envelope. And Tina felt like a rich queen. But she didn't know yet how expensive life in the capital could be. On the first day, she was informed that there were no vacant rooms in the student dormitory and that she had to sign up for a waiting list. She came to the classroom with her suitcase and sat down at a folding table, not knowing where she would go after classes. But fate was favorable to her. After the classes, that professor with a mustache, who asked her about Sebastian's last name, stopped her. He had introduced himself to the students at the beginning of class, but Tina, immersed in her own unhappy thoughts, had not remembered his name. "Iglesias," he said firmly, "follow me." Through the long corridors, they walked to another part of the university building. There were women working at computers, but at the sight of the professor, they all stood up and said hello. "Nestor, good afternoon." "Good morning," he nodded to them all at once. "Why didn't you provide this girl with a room? Why is she sitting in the auditorium with a suitcase?" The women fell silent, looking warily at their interlocutor. Finally, one of them said cautiously, "Martha said." "Martha said what?" The man shouted. Didn't I warn you that students from the province who got a scholarship should get a room in the dormitory first? How many available rooms do you have in the dormitory? 11. And how many students from the village got a scholarship this year? 2, the same woman said timidly. 2. The professor shouted. And you refuse to provide her with a room in the dormitory? It's a shame. If I ever hear of such a situation again, you'll be fired, all of you. Is that clear? Yes, Nestor, the women said, almost crying. I hope it doesn't happen again. And he left the office, but not slamming the door like Tina's father, he left quietly. It's a nightmare, said one of the women. He is so angry today. Tina grinned to herself. If they had known her father, they would know what a truly angry man was like. The dormitory was noisy, crowded, and fun. There were different colorful personalities everywhere. Some were dressed wildly, and some were dressed in such a way that they looked almost naked. Shy Tina blushed and turned her eyes away every minute. She was embarrassed to look at young guys wearing only gym shorts. She made her way through the mixed crowd, found her room, and knocked on the door, timidly opening it. May I come in? Come in. A blonde girl with dark gray eyes, sitting on the bed in a Turkish style, said cheerfully. You're my roommate, right? Yes, Tina confirmed. I arrived today. Oh no, the girl said, pretending to be sad. I was planning to rent the second bed and make some money. And, seeing the fear and bewilderment in the eyes of the new girl, she laughed. Just kidding. Come on in, make yourself comfortable. I'll show you everything. The neighbor's name was Lola. She lived in the suburbs of the capital, so she also got a room in the dormitory, but she knew the city well, and the university too. Her older brother had studied there. Besides, she studied at the training courses here for 2 years before applying to this university. After unpacking her suitcase, Tina sat down on the bed, looked around the room, and finally felt that she was at home, at her new temporary home. From now on, she was a university student and would live and study here like everyone else. In the 3rd year, Tina, who was already one of the best students, an activist, and editor of the student newspaper, met Daniel. He was a handsome last-year student, his parents were politicians, he lived with his strict grandmother and was going to Norway for an internship in the coming fall. Actually, they had known each other for a long time, but now they began to communicate much more. Everyone knew both Daniel and Tina at the university, but they hardly ever talked to each other. That year, Tina was elected to the student council for the first time, and Daniel was its executive secretary for the 3rd year in a row. At first, the experienced council members only looked at the newcomers cautiously, trying to figure out if this was a worthy candidate. The 1980s were coming to an end, there were big changes in society, and students began to quietly and sometimes openly disregard fundamental values, break the rules, and behave more cheekily. One day, coming early to a council meeting, Tina saw that in the office of the students' organization, where most of the meetings were taking place, the members of the council and other people were reading poetry. She sat in the back and listened. The poems surprised her or even shocked her. They read poems by authors she didn't know at all. And if she knew the author, they read something she had never heard before, for example, the early works of Marquez. The speakers and listeners were so immersed in poetry that they didn't notice that they were already halfway through the time that was designated for the student council meeting. Tina, unlike many others, noticed it but decided not to interrupt the speakers. Finally, someone realized that the non-council members had already taken their books and left, and Daniel looked sternly at those who were still there. I hope there are no snitches among us. Almost everyone started talking, indicating their position. They said, no, of course not, what are you talking about? How could you think that? And so on. Tina sat silent and didn't say a word until the meeting started. When the meeting was over and the other students had left, Daniel approached her. Tina, why were you silent when I asked about the snitches? Tina smiled slightly, leaving her eyes serious. I think it's unnecessary to publicize obvious facts. Really? He looked at her curiously. Shall we discuss the obvious facts when we have some free time? Do you really have free time? She asked boldly. I'm not going to have any free time anytime soon. Don't you eat or drink? He grinned. Why? Of course, I do, like everyone else, in the cafeteria. But I think you have in mind some more private places for eating and other things related to the process. I like your idea. He looked at her evaluatively and shifted his eyebrows slightly. Do you live in a dormitory? Yes, she nodded. But I don't recommend coming there. The supervisor is evil at the entrance. Are you talking about Paula? Daniel laughed. I can knock her out with one hand. I'd like to see that, Tina smiled, imagining the scene between Daniel and angry Paula. Paula always yelled at the students who didn't live at the dormitory and at other people trying to get inside. Where are you going? Anyone not living in the dormitory is not allowed in. However, the residents of the dormitory, who wanted to invite guests, persuaded Paula in various ways. The most reliable way was not money, but wool. Paula was passionate about knitting, and she tried to get the rare yarn by any means. Students often gave her different knitting supplies. Paula, here's some high-quality yarn. Let's have a look. She put the bribe on the table, examined it closely, and muttered something like, That's enough for 4 pairs of socks. Or, Holy moly! It's enough for a good sweater. Depending on the value of the bribe, guests were allowed in for certain periods of time, set by Paula and monitored vigilantly. Locking the front door so that no one would dare to enter or leave without her permission, she raced around the dormitory, shouting, Room number 15, your guests should leave in 15 minutes. Room number 8, time's up, leave. Then, with a sense of accomplishment, she would return to the entrance and unlock the door for anyone who wanted to enter. The management appreciated Paula very much and constantly thanked her for her hard work. Sometimes they even paid her bonuses. So if Daniel wanted to win Tina's heart, he had to do the impossible, get past the vigilant Cerberus. And Tina didn't think much of it. She was pleased with his attention, but she was raised by strict parents and had no intention of flirting with him. Listen, Tina, do you mind if Juana and Georgia come over tonight? With boys, I suppose? Tina grinned. I guess Eladio's coming, too? Well, yes, Lola answered with fake indifference. Do you mind? I don't mind, but what about Paula? Tina asked, doubtful about the possibility of the neighbor's plan. Paula won't be a problem, Lola answered. The boys gave her a bag of good mohair for knitting on Saturday. Now the door is open until the end of the month. Then I'll go to the kitchen, Tina nodded her head. Have fun. Have you ever thought of getting a boyfriend? Lola asked almost sympathetically. You'll die alone. Don't worry about me, Tina said. I'll die, not you. Tina got used to the noisy parties of her neighbors long ago, but she never participated in them herself, therefore she earned the reputation of a boring prude. But she never stopped others from enjoying student life. When her friends were having fun in her room, she would grab her textbooks and go either to the empty kitchen or to the library, if it was still open. But today she didn't have a chance to study even for an hour. An excited Lola came in, shouting from the doorstep. Tina! Tina, let's go quickly. There's so much going on. What happened? The girl looked at her friend grudgingly. Can't you handle it without me? No way, Lola shook her head. Let's go. Sighing and putting her notebook aside regretfully, Tina obediently got up and followed Lola. There was a crowd in the room, but they were all looking out the window for some reason. Even though it was a cold winter, they had opened the window wide and were watching something. And there. Tina was covered with sweat from horror as soon as she saw the scene. Daniel stood outside on the iron slope of the windowsill, clutching a long scarlet rose in his teeth. He flatly refused to come into the room before you came. The girl shrieked, and the boys grinned and gestured approvingly. Daniel, please come down here, Tina asked. The guy let go of the window frame and pretended to fall. Tina jerked and rushed forward, then he quickly jumped down the slope into the room and dropped to one knee, handing her a rose. "Oh, incomparable and unapproachable lady." He began his speech in English. "Allow a night to decorate your home with this marvelous flower." Tina was angry for such a silly prank, but at the same time laughed with relief. No one was hurt, it was all over. Besides, his speech, that phrase about the unapproachable lady, reminded her of her lessons with Sebastian long ago. He had called her a young lady then, too. No one else had ever said that. "Bravo, sir!" The boys shouted, whistling and banging their fists on the nightstands. "What a performance! Well done! Hey, Paula's coming!" One of the students came into the room and warned them. "What the hell is going on in here?" Paula yelled angrily, raising her eyebrows as soon as she appeared on the threshold of the room. "Why did you open the window? Did you smoke in the room? Now all of you get out of here. Go back to your buildings. I don't care where you came from, but go home." "Paula," Tina said calmly, coming closer, "it's my fault, I'm sorry." "Your fault?" Paula looked at the girl, who had always been considered quiet and modest. "But what happened?" "It just happened by accident," Tina confessed, blinking innocently. "I was cleaning the window yesterday. I couldn't wait until spring, it was so dirty. It's unpleasant when the sun is shining, and I see dirty spots on the window. I cleaned the window from the outside too, even though it was cold," she said, shivering defiantly. "And I guess I didn't close the latch properly. You see, they don't fit properly into the hole. They've been painted so many times. And today the wind was so strong, so it opened the window. And a crow flew into the room." Tina continued to lie with inspiration. "A huge, cheeky crow. So, we tried to catch it, and it was not going to leave. It jumped on the closet, then on the ledge. We barely caught it. I'm sorry for all the fuss. Please forgive us. You're a good housekeeper," Paula finally said, glaring at Tina. "Are you from the village?" "Yes," she nodded. "It's obvious," Paula smiled approvingly. "And you have respect for the elders, not like other students." She nodded toward Tina's friends, who were sitting quietly on Lola's bed like guilty nestlings. "Okay, I'll forgive you this time. But I don't want any more noise, is that clear?" "Yes, it's clear," the students assured her. And Paula, stepping forward with her strong feet, moved to the end of the corridor and then down the stairs to her desk. "Come out, Crow," Lola giggled, turning to Daniel, who had been hiding under Tina's bed. "Get out of bed carefully, don't harm your feathers." Everyone was giggling, and Daniel crawled out, wrinkling his nose and rubbing his stiff limbs. "I'm fine, I'd do anything for a lady." "Stop fooling around." Tina pretended to be angry. "You better think about how you're gonna leave the dormitory." "What's there to think about?" The boy shrugged his shoulders. "I'll go out like everyone else, down the stairs. Paula will find out you don't live here, and then Lola and I will be in trouble." Tina objected. "Well, in this case, I'd better stay here," Daniel winked at her with a sly grin. "Well," Tina grimaced, "there's enough space under the bed for you. But you'll have to leave in the morning anyway because the cleaning lady will be here." "Oh ho," he sighed. "I guess I'll have to leave the way I came here, through the window." "Please don't." Tina got frightened. "It's better to use the stairs." "Tina, come on, he has a key to the back door." The boys laughed. "Did you really think he'd climb in through the window? Seriously?" Tina got furious, feeling offended to the core. "What's the point of all this show then? Did you want to mock the village dummy? Well, you succeeded, congratulations." She left the room and headed back to the kitchen. "Tina." He caught up with her at the kitchen door. "Wait. Go through the back door," he said sternly without turning around. "Go, that's enough for today." "Tina." He suddenly put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her closer to him. Are you always so prickly? After all, it's just an innocent joke. She wanted to say something harsh, but he was so close, and he was looking her right in the eye. Her breath caught, and she forgot everything she wanted to say. She was trembling when Daniel turned her around gently so that their faces were very close to each other. Thanks for not ratting me out to Paula, he whispered. Even though I'm not afraid of her. Congratulations. Tina shrieked, but he was already kissing her. And it was a real adult kiss. It was both scary and amazing. From that day on, they began dating. Of course, she didn't allow him anything but kisses. But the reputation of the shy prude was hopelessly ruined from that moment on. The last bastion has fallen under the brave knight's attack, fellow students joked, but Tina didn't care. She was in love. Every week, Tina wrote 2 letters. One to her mother and grandmother, and one to Yvonne. She told them in detail about her studies, about everything that was happening at the university, and about her life in the capital. She loved to walk around this ancient and mysterious city, to stroll slowly, if she had free time. Quiet, narrow streets and ancient buildings seemed amazing to her. There was nothing like that in her native land. When Tina walked around the city, she felt like she was walking through the pages of a history book. Tina always walked alone. She didn't need a noisy and restless company. If she was not walking alone, this fragile charm disappeared. Old buildings and palaces ceased to seem mysterious. And the rustling trees, the piers of a bygone era, were silent and no longer told their amazing stories. But with Daniel it was different. He was like a walking compendium of stories, and he seemed to know almost everything about the city. Here, this is the Revenue House, he said, showing her the imposing building. It was designed by Gypius. How do you know it all? Tina wondered. My grandmother worked as a tour guide all her life, Daniel explained, at the museum. So I grew up going on all sorts of excursions, he smirked. My parents came rarely. They were in Portugal, then in Morocco, then in Austria, then in Germany, then somewhere else. They have already traveled the whole world, and the same is awaiting you and me. But I won't leave my children with grandmothers. Children need parents. Daniel said firmly. Children? Tina asked a little mockingly. Well, yes, Daniel nodded affirmatively. You and I will have 2 children, a boy and a girl. Wow, you've already thought of that. What if it's 2 girls? Tina laughed. Well, it's possible, Daniel said, but I'm okay with that, too. At that moment he spoke jokingly, but towards the end of the year, he proposed to Tina to move in together and live together. No, she shook her head negatively. I can't live with you before the wedding. Do you really need a wedding? He looked at her questioningly. Do you really want a big wedding with hundreds of guests? I mean, we could just register our marriage without celebration, just you and me. Register? Tina was confused. What do you mean? No witnesses and no guests? Yes, he nodded. Tina, I don't want you to suffer. I would never offer you something humiliating or embarrassing. Although, in my opinion, there's nothing embarrassing about 2 people in love living together. But I respect your point of view, he added quickly, seeing that Tina was about to get angry. I really do. And that's why I suggest we register our marriage now, and we can celebrate it when my parents get here. Next year. Okay? But what am I going to say at home? Tina was confused. Don't say anything yet, Daniel suggested. We will invite all your relatives and friends when we have a real wedding. Until then, we'll live like this, but not for long. In October, I'll leave for an internship. But, Tina said hesitantly and got confused. What? What else? He put his arm around her. What are you afraid of? Daniel, she hesitated for a moment, not knowing how to talk about the sensitive matter. What if we? Daniel realized. Don't worry, we're modern people. We'll register the marriage, you'll go to the doctor, and they'll prescribe you some pills. Medicine is very advanced nowadays, he grinned. Let's postpone having children for a while. I just don't want to leave you like this. I'm there and you're here. I will not feel comfortable, you know? I understand, Tina said, smiling. Are you afraid that without you I'll find someone else? Exactly, he pressed her tighter against him. I'm very afraid. Maybe you'll get an academic leave and we'll go together, eh? Well, no. Tina refused. There are only 2 years left. We'll get through it somehow. She loved Daniel, but still, she wasn't going to give up her dream to get a top university degree and travel the world. The big world, the real world, with all its diversity. If she agrees to everything Daniel suggests now, she'll say goodbye to her diploma and to her dream. Endless relocations, life at the embassy, it is interesting and tempting. But you never know where they'll send you after the internship. What if they send us to Somalia? Is she going to finish her studies there? And then she will have her first baby, and that will be the end. Her dream will never come true. They registered their marriage at the very beginning of June, and at the end of September, he left for Norway. Tina cried for a while, but she stopped herself in time. She had no time to be sad, she had to study. And she immersed herself in her studies, as before. Seminars, lectures, term papers, and student newspaper, which they published in foreign languages, there were enough things to do. The only thing that had changed was that she no longer lived in the student dormitory. Before Daniel left, he introduced her to his grandmother, a tall, skinny, stern-faced old woman. His grandmother was the only person he told about the marriage. No one else was informed, neither friends nor parents. Daniel explained that he didn't want to upset his mother. My father doesn't really care, he barely notices us all, he told Tina with an ironic, bitter chuckle. But Mom, she always wanted me to find my true love, a life partner who would be right for me. She wanted it to be like it was supposed to be, an introduction, a wedding, many guests, you know? I don't want any of that, but I don't want to upset my mother. If we tell her now, she'll be worried. If everyone finds out we're already married, we won't be able to have a proper wedding, and it's very important to my mom. I know it's all just strange bourgeois prejudices, but I hope you understand. I do, Tina nodded, I understand. My mom probably wants the same. So let's not make them worry. You'll graduate, I'll come back from my internship, and my parents will come back home. Then we'll have a real wedding. What about Grandma? Won't she tell anyone? Tina's worried. Grandma's my best friend. Daniel answered proudly. She's like a soldier, if she has to keep quiet, she'll keep quiet, no matter what happens. After they got married, they went to visit his grandmother. The apartment where she and Daniel lived shocked Tina, high ceilings, moldings, a bronze chandelier. Beautiful expensive curtains, like from the movies. And the furniture. It seemed to Tina that such furniture could only exist in fairy tale palaces. She ran her hand over the polished surface of a huge sideboard on carved legs. It seemed as if the warm wooden surface was alive. Good evening, children. Grandmother greeted them, sitting in a high armchair and smoking a pipe. She is just like the Duchess from the Alice cartoon, Tina thought, trying not to stare at everything too intently. Well, let me congratulate you. The elderly woman continued calmly. Now you are husband and wife, and you are the masters of your lives. Daniel, I am very glad that you informed me. It is possible that before you return there will be only a box of ashes left of me. Grandmother. Daniel started to protest, but the old woman raised a thin, wiry hand and continued. In that case, I shall rely on you, sweet girl. My dear, what is your name? I'm sorry, I forgot, it's because of my age. Tina, she said. Well, Tina. If my soul leaves my body before the arrival of other relatives, you will have to take care of the funeral chores as my grandson's wife. Grandma, let's get to the happier part, okay? Daniel asked. We've already discussed your funeral 1,000 times, isn't that enough? It's too early for you to think about such things, but when the time comes, you may not talk about your funeral at all. But it's my funeral, and it has to be done properly, the old woman said calmly. Well, all right, your wife and I will have time to talk about this fascinating matter. But now, let's discuss more down-to-earth and fun things. Rosalia. She took a copper bell from the table and rang it. Footsteps sounded at the other end of the large apartment, doors slammed, and in a few minutes, Rosalia showed up, a middle-aged woman dressed in a simple blue dress and a white apron. And it seemed to Tina again that she was in the 19th century. They would go outside soon, and there would be a carriage waiting for them instead of a car, and people around them would be dressed in vintage outfits. The atmosphere of this apartment looked exactly like that. Rosalia, the elderly woman, repeated, "Darling, make some coffee, please." The maid didn't keep them waiting long, and 5 minutes later there was a coffee tray on the table with amazing, antique cups, saucers, spoons, a sugar bowl, as well as all kinds of cookies and small sandwiches canapes. Tina was afraid to even touch this beauty, but she had to drink her coffee and smile at the stern old woman. "Tell me, dear," she said to Daniel, "where are you going to live with your charming wife?" "Grandma, I hope you'll let us stay at my father's apartment," he said. "There's not much space, but we're not planning to have kids yet," he smiled. Of course, the old woman agreed, lifting her cup gracefully with 2 fingers. "It's too early for you. I guess, kiddo." This time she turned to Tina, "You're a couple of years away from graduation." "Yes," Tina nodded, 2 years. "But I don't expect to live in your apartment." She was embarrassed by her own words and lowered her head. "Daniel will leave soon. What will I do there alone? I'd rather live in a dormitory, like before." "So do you think that by becoming part of our family you won't have any responsibilities?" the old woman asked sternly, and Tina turned pale as she realized she had said the wrong thing. "Grandma!" Daniel cried out. "You frightened her." "Don't worry, Tina, she's joking," he patted his young wife on the shoulder. "She just doesn't want to be left all alone." "But who would want to be alone at my age?" Grandma raised one eyebrow arrogantly. "So, my dear, you will live in the same building, but don't worry, not with me. We have a small apartment in the same building, where my son used to live. We keep it tidy, but no one has lived there for years. You're part of our family now, this is a fact, therefore you should live in decent conditions. We'll entertain each other when Daniel leaves. Do you know how to play solitaire, honey?" "No," Tina shook her head. "Nice." For some reason the old woman was happy. "Then I'll teach you." "Well, and now?" She stood up heavily from her chair, twisted her shoulder, and firmly walked toward the sideboard at the far end of the room. She opened the drawer and took out a small velvet box, came back as briskly as before, sat back down, and solemnly handed it to Tina. "Take it, dear, it's yours now." Tina gently pressed the lever and the lid opened. Inside shone and shimmered with a beauty that took Tina's breath away. The antique twisted frame of a massive ring encircled the crystal-clear stone, and its surface shimmered with 1,000 little rainbows in the light of the lampshade above the table. "Oh!" Tina exhaled in admiration, gently stroking the stone. "Is that a real diamond?" Then she came to her senses and looked up. "Thank you." "You're welcome." The elderly woman smiled with a corner of her mouth. "Of course, it's a diamond. One of our 2 family stones. You'll wear it until your eldest grandson gets married. Remember, then you'll pass it on to his wife. What if we don't have a grandson, just a granddaughter? Or I will die before that moment?" Tina asked cautiously. "Then it will go to your son's wife or back to the family safe," Grandma answered with a sigh. "We'll discuss the details later. But now try it on." Tina carefully put the ring on. It was too big for her ring finger, but it fit her middle finger well. "Good. Keep it on this finger for now," the old lady said. "You'll change it in time." They talked for half an hour, said goodbye to the grandmother, took the keys, and went to check out the apartment. Wait, Daniel stopped Tina when she was about to enter. That's not the way we should do it. He easily picked her up and lifted her in his arms, crossed the threshold, gently lowered her into the hallway, and kissed her. Like this. Daniel, she stroked his cheek. How lucky I am to have you. No, I'm more lucky, because I have you, he answered her affectionately and helped her take off her coat. Are we going to sleep here tonight? Tina was embarrassed when she realized what was about to happen tonight. I don't have anything with me, not even pajamas. I didn't think about it. That's all right. Daniel replied solemnly as he led her to the bedroom door. Well, take a look. Tina looked in and gasped with delight. The big double bed with the bent iron headboard was covered with white rose petals. Roses were everywhere in vases, even on the floor. And candles between them. The beautiful curtains were shut and there was a carton box tied with a golden ribbon on the nightstand. Open it. Daniel smiled. There was a set of the most elegant home clothes Tina had ever seen. A soft cream nightgown with thin straps, a top and shorts of the same color, and an incredible silk robe. What a beauty! She stroked the delicate fabric. Thank you, Daniel. You'll find everything you need in the bathroom, her husband told her and got on the bed. I'm waiting. They didn't get much sleep that night. And the next day Tina was late for classes for the first time ever, but she didn't regret it at all. The only thing left to do was to notify the university that she had changed her last name. Please, don't tell anyone at the university yet, Tina asked the university staff. She had been friends with them for a long time and trusted them. And what will we get for such a favor? The girls grimaced funny. If you keep quiet, I won't punish you. Daniel, who had come with Tina, joked. And to make it easier for you to keep quiet, here's a present. He handed one of them a large box. It's for everyone. Tina and Daniel walked out and were followed by enthusiastic cheers. The girls opened the box and apparently they liked the contents. How did you calculate and prepare everything in advance? My foresightful husband. Tina pressed affectionately against his shoulder. You should get used to this. He looked around and gave her a quick kiss. Well, see you tonight? See you tonight, she smiled and stood outside the classroom for another half a minute, watching him walk away down the corridor. And so, the new academic year began. Daniel had left, and Tina was left in this beautiful and still somewhat unfamiliar apartment, which was too spacious for her. From now on, Tina's days went like this. In the morning she would get up early, 2 hours before classes, make some homemade buns, pies, and other treats and bring them to grandmother Serafina, that was her name. Serafina, good morning. Tina said cheerfully as she entered the large, dark apartment. The old woman couldn't stand bright light, her eyes were watery, so the curtains were almost always drawn. I brought you some buns. Tina, my dear, the grandmother answered, I've told you so many times, don't worry about me, Rosalia feeds me perfectly well. I don't want to hear anything about it. Tina laughed. Daniel told me to take care of you, so you will have to eat buns. The old woman also smiled happily, and it was obvious that she was very pleased with the attention of her new family member. They discussed all sorts of small things and plans for the coming day. Sometimes Serafina told her something interesting about the city, though more often it was over dinner. They had dinner together, too. Tina felt very lonely in the long evenings alone. Soon she and grandmother became very close friends. You are a good, pure soul, little girl, grandmother told her many times. Stay the same for the rest of your life, but only on the inside. And on the outside, you need to grow a hippo skin, like a shield, you know. So that other people's black evil can't touch you. Oh, child, there are so many evil, bad, callous, and stupid people in the world. Tina nodded and agreed, and then told her in turn about her childhood in the village, about her own grandmother, about her mother, about her favorite teacher who helped her find her way in life, to whom she continued to write letters every week. "I want to tell them everything so much," Tina complained to Serafina. "But I realize it's too soon. Otherwise, there will be no surprise, no celebration." "Yes, you should wait a little longer with the news," the old lady agreed and smoked her traditional pipe. "Or maybe," she pointed with her eyes at Tina's belly, "maybe you'll have to let them know sooner?" "No," Tina blushed. "It's nothing like that. I saw a gynecologist before the wedding." She wrinkled her nose at the memory. "I took care of it. We agreed to wait until I finished my studies. Then we'd have a baby. I'll teach foreign languages in the embassy schools, otherwise, who will hire me?" "No one." "That's perfectly reasonable," Grandma nodded. "Well, go, baby, you have to get up early tomorrow." "I'll stay up a little longer." That's how they lived. Tina also wrote long and detailed letters to her husband about everything that was happening day by day. He answered her too, but less often and much shorter. There was no telephone in the apartment where they lived, but Serafina had one. Sometimes they talked to Daniel, but not for long. But in the end, he always told her how much he loved her and how much he missed her. And those evenings were filled with the greatest happiness for Tina. But one Saturday afternoon, Tina was cleaning the apartment. It all collapsed in a flash. The doorbell rang. Then again and again. The insistent ringing made Tina finally take off her thick rubber gloves, put the rag aside, and run to the front door from the bathroom, where she was diligently scrubbing the tiles. Tina opened the latch and the door swung open with a crack like a cannon shot. Tina stepped back in fright. A fat woman with bright makeup and a disgruntled, squeamishly crooked face stepped over the threshold. "Is this where you live?" she said loudly and squeakily and shut the door with her foot. "Are you looking for someone?" Tina was confused. "For you, my dear, for you." The lady walked into the living room, then into the kitchen, paying no attention to Tina, as if she were furniture. She looked around and went to the bedroom, but then the girl came out of her stupor and sharply asked the stranger, "Let me ask you, who are you and what are you doing in my apartment?" "Your apartment?" The lady grinned. "I am Daniel's mother, your so-called husband." She said the word ironically and looked Tina straight in the eye. "You didn't expect that?" Tina was completely confused, everything jumbled up in her head, and an old, black and white photo and a family album came to her mind, showing Daniel's parents at their own wedding with a big bouquet. And another picture of his mom, a very young, smiling lady, holding a 3-month-old baby boy's little Daniel. This fat woman was nothing like that young and sweet girl, but people change over time. "You're back from your business trip already?" It was all Tina could utter. "Already," the lady announced and stood right in front of Tina. "Listen to me, girl." It sounded like a verdict. "My Daniel is not for you, rustic redneck. He had plenty of girls like you. I don't know what you've done to enchant him, you must be good at spreading your legs." At these words, all the blood rushed to Tina's head, and she, not daring to object, staggered back and clung to the door. And the lady went on without paying the slightest attention to this fact. "I have absolutely no idea what he told you. Men can be very persistent if they need something. But as a woman, you must understand me," she grinned nastily again. "You shouldn't get your hopes up. No country girl will ever, do you hear? No country girl will ever enter our family as my daughter-in-law. Me and Daniel's father already have a suitable match for him. They studied at the same course, a good, decent girl from a very decent family. Not like you, redneck. Besides..." She walked into the room, as if she were at home, and sat down on the sofa, took out a handkerchief from her purse, and wiped her sweaty face. "Besides, we don't need low-quality grandchildren from such plebeian blood as yours. You're incapable of giving birth to a normal child, you country idiot. All country people have underdeveloped brains." She went on and on with some horrible insults, saying something else. And finally, Tina just couldn't take it anymore. "Go away, please," she wrapped her arms around her head. "What? What did you say?" The mother-in-law was indignant. "Should I leave?" "No. You have to get out of our lives immediately, do you hear me? Immediately. I don't want you to be here when Daniel comes back. Do you understand? Get out." Tina, who had never been so insulted by anyone before, shouted out loud. Bitter tears streamed down her face, but she didn't notice them. Her temples were pounding frantically, and she was short of breath. She wanted to break something, preferably the head of this horrible woman. But Tina overcame this terrible impulse, ran to the front door, swung it open, and screamed with all her might. "Go away, or you will regret it." The woman was shocked, turned pale, got up from the sofa, and, looking at Tina fearfully, moved toward the exit. She cautiously made her way through the apartment, as if expecting an attack. And finally, having jumped out of the threshold, she yelled one last time. "You country bumpkin! You're wild. You shouldn't be in a decent society." And she ran down the stairs. Tina slammed the door behind her and slumped to the floor on weak legs. She had a terrible headache, her eyes were swollen from crying, and she desperately wanted to just fall asleep and then wake up in the morning and realize that it was just a terrible nightmare. But it wasn't a nightmare. Her life really fell apart that day. Tina had a lot on her mind that day. That lady offended her. How could she talk like that? Tina kept replaying over and over in her head the terrible phrases and accusations Daniel's mother had showered her with. Lying sleepless in the dark on the big bed without her beloved, Tina cried and couldn't stop. She was having a real hysteria, a nervous breakdown. But she was inexperienced in such things and she didn't know what she could do. She should probably take a sedative, or drink coffee, or go to Serafina and tell her everything. Perhaps Serafina would have saved the situation, but Tina's temper didn't allow her to complain and ask for help. She didn't even call her husband. Maybe he doesn't care anymore. What can he say to her now? Now it's clear why he insisted on a secret marriage. Obviously, his family will never accept her. She knew she could always talk to Serafina, but it was unlikely Daniel's parents would listen to the old lady. And at the thought of what would happen if she met Daniel's father face to face, she broke out in a cold sweat and shuddered. If his mother behaved like that, what could she expect from his father? Especially since her own experience with her father told her about the worst possible outcome. In the morning, Tina, pale, with dark circles around her eyes and completely devastated, took the family ring off her middle finger, put it on the table, took her belongings, only those she had before her marriage, and left with her shabby suitcase for the train station. She carefully hung the key to the apartment on the doorknob of Serafina's apartment and rang the bell twice. She waited until she heard Rosalia's footsteps and ran away. On her way to the station, she stopped at the post office, purchased an envelope, wrote an application to the university to get an academic leave for family reasons, and sent the letter to the right address. At lunchtime, she was already on the train carriage, having absolutely no idea what she would do next. But right now, it was impossible for her to stay in this city, where she had been treated so unfairly. Serafina. The bewildered Rosalia brought her the key Tina had left on the doorknob. I opened the door and found this key. Where should I put it? And Tina didn't visit you today, is she sick? Give it to me, the old woman frowned, but said nothing about the situation. She had her breakfast as usual, smoked her morning pipe, and told Rosalia to give her coat. Where are you going? Rosalia got worried. You are usually reading at this time of day. I'm not going far, she said absent-mindedly, putting on her old-fashioned hat with the brim turned down. I just wanted to get some fresh air. It took Serafina 20 minutes to walk out of that part of the building and go up to the 4th floor of another section of the same building. Of course, there was no elevator in their old building with its wide hallway. Entering her grandson's apartment, she took a quick glance. There was no Tina's outerwear, and as she made her way into the room, she found the ring lying on the table. There was no note nearby. Frowning, Serafina took the ring, closed the apartment, and returned to her apartment in the same manner. When she arrived, she sat down in her high chair, closed her eyes, and told Rosalia not to disturb her on any pretext for the next hour and a half. Rosalia took advantage of this short break, took her coat, and slipped out of the apartment to walk to the nearest pastry shop and talk with the other housekeepers over a cup of coffee. Rosalia sat down at a small table by the window, took out a cheap compact powder, and fixed her makeup. Then her friend and neighbor Agata came, and then other women who usually got a break at this time. It was the most convenient time. The hosts had left for work or somewhere else after breakfast and would only be here for lunch, so they had half an hour to talk. 5 minutes later, a pretty Susanna from the 19th apartment joined them. "Oh, girls, you have no idea what was going on yesterday," she informed her friends in an excited tone. "Nadi came back yesterday and started attacking everyone. Honestly, Rodrigo and I didn't know where to hide. Then her husband came back, and she started yelling at him, too. She complained about everything. He listened to her hysterics silently for a while, but then he couldn't stand it anymore, banged his fist on the table, and said, 'Shut up, woman, or I'll hit you right now.' She sobbed and answered him, 'I've just been to your apartment, where our son lives with his redneck. The one he calls his wife in public. Have you ever heard of it?' I told her everything I thought about her. I told her who she was, who we were, and what she should expect. And she cried like a white whale. Then her husband asked her, 'How did you know where Daniel and his wife live?' I heard the housekeepers talking in the pastry shop that Daniel and his young wife had moved into the apartment with the dark walnut door on the 4th floor. He didn't say a word to us, little bastard. He rented an apartment in the same building and didn't say us anything. And what makes you think, my dear," her husband said to her calmly, "that it was our Daniel that the housekeepers were talking about?" "What do you mean?" his wife said in confusion. Then he got up from the table and called me. Can you imagine, girls? Well, I entered the room. I thought I was going to lose my job. The owner asked me calmly, "Susanna, my dear, was it you who told the neighbors about Daniel in the pastry shop?" And I answered him, "I did say that, Lionel, but not about your son Daniel, about another guy from next door. I think his name is Daniel too. I heard from Rosalia that he got married a couple of months ago and now lives with his wife on the 4th floor. And his wife is a sweet, affectionate woman. Did you hear that?" Our boss turned on his wife. "Immediately go to them, you damn dummy, and apologize. You broke into someone else's apartment. Ugh. How am I supposed to look them in the eye now, huh? Why are you flapping your eyes, stupid? It's a shame. And our Daniel is renting an apartment in another building. I gave him the money for that." He told her something else, but I couldn't hear. I ran out of there. Wow. Rosalia's eyes widened. "So your hostess went to Artina?" "Oh, my gosh." And I wondered why the key was hanging from the doorknob. "What key?" The friends were curious and narrowed their eyes inquisitively. But Rosalia was smart enough not to explain anything to them now. "Oh, it's time to go," she realized. "I need to go, girls, or Serafina will scold me. We'll talk later, some other time." When Rosalia returned home, she went straight to Serafina, knocked on the door cautiously, and when she heard that she could come in, she rushed to her hostess and told her what she had heard from Susanna. "You are very smart, Rosalia," Serafina said thoughtfully. "I'm very happy that you're working for me, thank you. If the Alonsos come, well, the parents of Daniel Alonso, tell them that I am not at home. Understand? Whenever they come, I'm not at home." "I got it." "I understand," Rosalia shook her head. "But Serafina, what about our dear Tina?" Rosalia looked sympathetically and her eyes became wet. "Tina will return," the old woman said with conviction. "Come on, Rosalia, it's okay, don't cry. Everything will be fine." Serafina relaxed in her soft chair again and closed her eyes tiredly. She sat like that for 15 minutes, rose again, went to the telephone, picked up the receiver, dialed the number, and said, "Could you please connect me with the embassy?" Yes, of course, I'll wait." Tina looked with red and dry eyes at the vast native land running outside the train window. She had no more tears. Last night, she had already cried all the tears that nature had given her for this period of her life. But it was even worse without tears. She felt like everything was burning inside, and her swollen eyelids itched terribly. After thinking for a while, she got up and went to the conductor's compartment. "Good evening, do you have any eye cream or eye drops? Something got into my eye and it itches terribly." "We don't have any creams," the woman said indifferently. "Would you like some coffee?" "Yes, please," Tina said faintly and was about to turn and leave, but then the conductor looked up at her and apparently felt sorry for her when she saw the condition of her eyes. "I can give you some Vaseline, I have one unopened. It costs 1.50. "It's better than nothing," Tina shrugged her shoulders. "Thank you." The Vaseline made her eyes feel better, and she even sipped hot coffee and cheered up a little. Her head was no longer buzzing, and she lay down to try to take a nap. She had a long ride ahead of her, though it was unlikely that she would fall asleep now. Her thoughts took her far back in time, when she was traveling on the same train, but in the opposite direction to a distant unknown city, full of bright hopes. Then her first class, confusion, unexpected help of the professor, dormitory, meeting Lola, student years, Daniel. He is so handsome, so clever, so intelligent, she loves him so much. Maybe he didn't know about this conversation at all, and his mother wouldn't be able to stop them? Although, stupid redneck? That's what his mother called Tina. Maybe she is right. What did you expect, Tina? Of course, you're no match for him. His mother is absolutely right. You don't even know how to use all those fancy cutlery. You wanted to be a politician's wife, but you don't even know how to hold a coffee cup properly. You'll embarrass yourself and him. So, go to your village and stay there forever, stupid redneck. With these unhappy thoughts and the pounding of the wheels, Tina fell into a deep sleep. The gloomy morning was already slipping into a long, boring gray day when Tina finally woke up. It took her a while to understand where she was and to remember how she had ended up on a train in the middle of the academic year. She quickly recalled the events of the last few days and smiled bitterly at her reflection in the window. So, did you become the wife of a successful politician? The fairy tale life is over. Go to the village, Tina, see your family, and tell them some lies about life in the capital and why you came to your native land in the middle of the academic year. And then come back and study, as before. Except they won't give you a dormitory room anymore. Well, it's okay. You can rent a cheap room, that's how a lot of students live. You'll work part-time as a tutor and survive the remaining 2 years somehow. It's silly to give up everything because of a broken heart. That's what Tina said to herself, and she finally calmed down. She felt sorry for Serafina. How would she live there all alone? But what could she do? Fairy tales transferred to real life rarely have a happy ending. Having come to such a disappointing but reasonable conclusion, Tina felt wild hunger. Since she didn't have any food, she went to the train cafeteria. She looked at the menu for a long time and finally ordered the cheapest breakfast she could find, scrambled eggs and cafe. She waited for the order, ate with gusto, and felt alive again. She went back to her compartment and looked out the window again. Then she got bored and took out a textbook from her suitcase. Why waste time? She had already missed a couple of lectures she needed to catch up. By evening, immersed in her book, she suddenly realized she hadn't thought about what to say to her family, why she suddenly came to the village in October. Winter break was far away. What could she say? She hadn't thought about it when she'd gotten on the train in frustration. And now, as luck would have it, nothing smart came to mind. Eventually, Tina decided not to come home at all. Why would she do that? Of course, she wanted to see her mother and grandmother, to talk to them, to ask for advice. especially from her grandmother. Her own dear grandmother, whom she hadn't seen for almost 4 years. It was strange, but Serafina reminded Tina of her own grandmother, despite all her primness and aristocratism. Maybe all grandmothers are the same? She didn't know the answer to that question. Unfortunately, she would only see her dear teacher. She could tell him everything. He would not cry, would not scold her, and would not touch the fresh wound. She would stay there for a couple of days and then take a return ticket. Having made this decision, Tina finally calmed down and fell asleep again. The train arrived early, at 6 in the morning. But she had to take a bus to the district center and then another bus to her village. A long journey. She had lived in the capital for almost 4 years and had already forgotten how far away her village was. In the afternoon, she reached the village where her school was located. There were familiar outlines of buildings, a bus stop, and a school porch. It was a weekday, so Yvonne was in the classroom, as always. So, children, today we are going to learn the simplest form of all the tenses in the English language, present simple. Write it down in your notebooks. Tina peeked cautiously through the ajar door. There he was, the familiar, dear silhouette standing near the blackboard, writing something with chalk. She would not distract him during the lesson. A serious audience of 7 people should listen to the lesson according to all the rules. Only 7 students. What's going on? Soon there would be no one left in the village. Accompanied by such unhappy thoughts, Tina sat down on a chair in the corridor and waited for the school bell to ring. Knock, knock. She peeked into the classroom when the students left. May I come in? Tina. Yvonne looked surprised. Why are you here? Aren't you happy to see me? Tina replied with a mocking smile and immediately came up and hugged the teacher. Everything is fine at the university, don't worry. I'm here for just a few days. Did something happen at home? The teacher got worried. No, as far as I know, nothing. Tina pulled away, looked him in the eyes. Can I stay at your place for a few days? I have nowhere else to go. I promise to explain everything later. Sure. Yvonne was pleased but shocked. Sure, make yourself comfortable. Here's your key. Do you remember where I live? He joked. I have classes until 2 p.m., so I'll see you later, okay? Of course, I remember, Tina assured him, took the key, thanked him, and left the school. She wandered slowly through the village, looking at the changes that had happened while she was away. However, she didn't see any special changes. Well, there was a new roof on one of the houses. And the tree above the telegraph pole because really huge. She reached Yvonne's house, opened the latch on the gate, and, passing the old neglected garden, opened the door to the house. Nothing had changed here at all, and Tina felt as if she were back in her school days. Meanwhile, Yvonne had finished his last lesson and was sitting at the table, checking a few notebooks. Excuse me, can I talk to you? A handsome boy looked into the office. Come in, please. Yvonne stood up towards the stranger and thought to himself, what an unusual day, a lot of surprises. I'm sorry, but I don't remember you. Do we know each other? He said to the young man, shaking his hand. You are right, we don't know each other, the visitor replied. Or rather, I know you from my wife's stories. And as far as I understand, you don't know anything about me. I guess so. Yvonne was a little confused. Are you visiting someone here? Not really, the boy laughed and suddenly slapped himself on the forehead. I'm an idiot. I didn't even introduce myself. Sorry, it took me a long time to get here and I'm really exhausted, so my mind is foggy. Daniel. And you are Yvonne, right? That's right, the man smiled. Please, take a seat, he pointed to a chair. Tell me, what brought you here? My wife, Tina Iglesias, studied here a few years ago, the man said. We had an unfortunate misunderstanding, and according to my information, she was supposed to arrive here today. Tina? Yvonne was surprised. Tina got married? Yes, Daniel smiled. I know she hasn't written to you or even told her relatives. But we'll fix it today, he promised. Really? Yvonne rubbed his temple thoughtfully and wondered whether he should tell this man that Tina was at his house. But he pushed the thought away from him and decided that he would do everything possible to protect the girl dear to his heart from uninvited guests. Have you seen her by any chance? Has she come to see you? Daniel asked with evident hope. I reached the nearest city by plane and then took a cab from there. I hoped to meet her at the train station, but I didn't make it. He didn't mention that before that flight he had another one, from Oslo to his native country. She was here an hour ago, Yvonne said with a sigh. And I believe right now she is at my house. Really? Daniel rejoiced. May I ask you to show me the way? Of course, Yvonne nodded. But you will have to wait a little while I finish some work here. Of course. Daniel said quickly. I'll go for a walk around the neighborhood. But please, Daniel, Yvonne stopped him, don't try to find the way without me. Any villager can show you where the teacher's house is, but don't do that, please. Yvonne, Daniel replied with dignity, I am not the most virtuous man in the world, but I am not a scoundrel. I realize that you don't know me at all and you want to protect Tina. I appreciate that very much. And I will not try to sneak into your house, I promise. He tilted his head as a sign that he had finished speaking and wouldn't interfere any further. Then he left the classroom. Yvonne smiled at his own thoughts, nodded approvingly, and went back to the textbooks. He had developed this quality in himself long ago. Nothing should interfere with his work. Whatever was going on, finish your work first. An hour later, he and Daniel were on the same road as Tina had been just before, talking about everything along the way. Yvonne became more and more convinced that Tina's husband was a good man, and was glad that he had not yet lost his ability to understand people's nature. Visitors were so rare in the village that there was simply no one to use and improve his social skills on. Daniel, Yvonne said as they approached the house, please wait outside for a few minutes while I inform Tina of your arrival. It would be unfair to shock her like this. Can you imagine her feelings when she suddenly sees me in your company? Yes, Daniel agreed. I wanted to offer the same. And if she doesn't want to see you, I won't persuade her. I hope you understand that, Yvonne said politely. Yes, sure, I understand, Daniel agreed. But please, I beg you, tell her that whatever happened was just an unfortunate misunderstanding, nothing more. And that if she doesn't want to see me, I'll stay here in front of your house until she comes out. I'll tell her. Yvonne promised and grinned involuntarily as he imagined the scene. The whole village would come to see it. Nothing had happened here for years, and if a stranger would sit outside the teacher's house day and night, it would be better than a circus for the local people. The whole neighborhood will be informed. Life in the village was so boring that by now all the villagers were already discussing the handsome stranger, trying to find out who he had come to see. Yvonne knocked on his own door and entered, took off his boots, and left them near the door. Tina was sitting on the couch with her legs tucked up and reading something. When she saw the teacher, she brightened up and jumped up to meet him. I'm so glad you're here already. I wanted to cook something for lunch, but I was too shy to open your fridge without your permission. Let me know if you need anything. I'll go to the store right away. Wait, Tina, Yvonne stopped her boiling enthusiasm. Please, take a seat. Tina sat at the table, smiling, and the teacher sat down next to her. He looked at her tenderly and stroked her cheek as if she were a child. How are you, my dear? He asked affectionately. Well, pretty good, Yvonne. It's just that I'm going through such a rough time right now. She sighed, not knowing how to begin, and then suddenly made up her mind. I suddenly decided to come, and I didn't say anything to anyone. I didn't write you a letter. I'm sorry. The thing is, I got married, Yvonne, she said, looking away. She was ashamed to confess that she had not told him about such an important event in her life. My husband is a very good man, but I realize that we have no future together, and I will never reach his level. He grew up in a different environment and his family has different demands. Tears came to her eyes. You know what I mean? Tina, he stroked her hand. Darling, listen to me, please. Don't cry, just don't cry, and don't worry. I'm sure your husband doesn't think so. How do you know? Tina asked bitterly. He told me himself, the teacher answered calmly. What? The girl didn't understand. Who told you? What do you mean? Your husband Daniel told me, the teacher smiled a little slyly. He's waiting outside right now. Yvonne nodded slightly in the direction of the front door. Also, he told me that if you don't want to see him, he'll sit outside my house for as long as it takes. No. No, that's impossible. Tina shook her head in confusion, pushing away the information that didn't fit reality. Yvonne, you've obviously misunderstood something. Daniel is in Norway now. He's on an internship there. Well, then go and see for yourself, the teacher suggested and shrugged. Maybe I really did misunderstand something. Tina jumped up and raced around the house, not knowing what to do. She looked out the windows, but they were on the other side of the house. She only saw an overgrown, unkept garden. The long bare cherry tree branches were banging on the window. Tina felt a heaviness and pain in her heart. She looked at her teacher in desperation, hoping to get some advice. He answered her with a calm, wise look. He covered his eyes for a second and nodded, which meant yes, of course, go and talk to him. He is waiting for you. He traveled hundreds of miles to see you. The wise teacher nodded his head toward the exit. Tina cried out, like a shot bird, and rushed to the exit without shoes, wearing only socks, even though it was freezing outside. Tina! Daniel saw her and rushed towards her. She rushed toward him too, as fast as she could, not feeling the cold, not thinking about the fact that she wasn't even dressed properly. Tina! He put his arms around her, hugged her tightly, and showered her face with hot kisses. My love. My little silly girl. Why did you run away? My God, you are barefoot. He picked her up in his arms and carried her into the house. Yvonne sat at the table with a hand under his chin, looking through the dusty window into the overgrown garden at the cherry branches and the clear sky between them. And his eyes were full of tears of joy. Until late at night, the newlyweds, who had found each other again, and the elderly lonely village teacher talked and sipped hot strong coffee with cognac, which Yvonne solemnly pulled out of his meager strategic reserves, saying, We should definitely celebrate such a meeting. You know, Daniel, I don't really drink alcohol. But today. I understand, Daniel smiled. I'm a bit emotionally drained too. Tina, you should drink some, too. You've suffered the most, my poor little girl. Interrupting each other, they told Yvonne everything that had happened in the last year, and especially in the last few days. Tina was not aware of the events that had taken place during the 2 days when Tina had been on the train, dying of shame and grief. Therefore Daniel talked more about it. Just try to imagine it. I am in Oslo, at the embassy, working quietly, and of course I miss my young wife. He smiled and hugged Tina by the shoulders. And then I got a phone call. Naturally, I immediately thought about the worst and, first of all, I assumed that something happened to Grandma because she's already 83 years old. I rushed to the phone for ordinary civilian conversations, picked up the phone with a sinking heart, and heard Grandmother's voice. I felt better in the first few seconds, but then she told me something that almost made me faint. But the chair came in handy. Anyway, she talked to me in her typical manner. Well, you know what I am talking about, sweetie, he winked at Tina. And he uttered, humorously copying his grandmother. Dear, just don't worry, but you have to come back home as soon as possible. Of course, I was shocked and asked, what happened? Nothing happened yet. She told me calmly. Everyone is alive and well. But if you don't come right away, the irreparable will happen. Jesus, Grandma, can you explain? I got really angry and just yelled into the phone, and the employees who were passing by stared at me. It was embarrassing. Listen carefully, my boy, I won't repeat it. Grandma told me about it as briefly as she could. Our neighbor Nadi, the mother of your classmate Daniel, burst into Tina's apartment and told her in a rude way that she was a country redneck and that she is not worthy to be part of such a decent family. Daniel Alonzo's mother? I was shocked. Is she a moron? Moron. Indeed. Her tiny brain can only be described by this. My grandmother agreed. But in this case, she was just mistaken, you know? She heard the girls in the pastry shop chatting about Daniel and decided that it was about her son, that her son Daniel had moved into the same building, rented an apartment for his girlfriend, and was about to marry her, according to rumors. And in the meantime, he introduced her to everyone as his wife. In fact, that Daniel is renting an apartment for this purpose. But not in our building, but somewhere else in the neighborhood. But the housekeepers also made a mistake and misunderstood. That's how rumors and misunderstandings almost ruined a few lives. The grandmother sighed heavily. And Tina. You know, dear, we became best friends while you were away. She is a beautiful, sincere, pure, caring girl. So Tina thought it was your mother who came and said all those horrible things to her. She left without telling anything to me. She also left the key and the ring. I did my investigations and found out that she'd bought train tickets the same day. She's clearly on her way home now. Oh, my God, my head almost exploded when I imagined what you must have thought. Daniel looked regretfully at Tina. I'm sorry, honey, I'm sorry you had to go through that. I should have shown you the recent pictures of my parents. My grandmother doesn't even have any. Just the old ones from the wedding. No one thought this would happen. My mom is nothing like that idiot Nadi, believe me. The whole neighborhood is sick of her behavior. Look, here are my parents. And Daniel handed Tina and Yvonne a color photo of a well-dressed couple sitting, posing for the photographer. They looked elderly, but they were still very beautiful. The man in a flawless blue suit, with a tie, slightly balding. And a gorgeous woman, with dark hair styled in an elegant manner, wearing a stunning dress. You have your mom's eyes. Tina marveled, handing the picture to the teacher. And the smile, he agreed. You really look a lot like your mother, Daniel. So, the boy continued after he showed the evidence. As soon as I realized what happened, I rushed to my superiors and wrote an application for urgent time off for family reasons. I had to lie to them that my grandmother was dying, otherwise, it would have taken too long to explain. By the way, she told me to do that. She said, I have the right to die unexpectedly, kiddo. But I also have the right to unexpectedly get better. So, take advantage of your old grandmother and don't tell anyone about the real situation. Pedro will provide us with the necessary certificate of my hospitalization. I have already arranged it with him. You know the rest, Daniel smiled at Yvonne. Then there was an airport, then another airport. My grandmother met me in the capital, she took a cab, and Rosalia accompanied her. She told me to give you this, darling. He turned to Tina, pulled a velvet box from his pocket, and pressed a lever. Please always wear it. And don't forget that there is no circumstance in the world that you and I can't handle together, just the two of us. Okay? And promise to tell me everything before you make any fateful decisions. Before you make any big decisions, Daniel corrected himself and kissed Tina gently on the cheek. She lowered her eyes shyly and said quietly, I promise. That's great. Yvonne relieved the situation. I have a present for you. It's not perfect, but please don't judge me harshly, because I wasn't prepared for your arrival. He opened a cabinet and took out a package tied with a string. Here, take it, please. I was keeping it until I could give it to you, Tina. What is it? Tina smiled and carefully unwrapped the unexpected surprise. My God! She gasped. Look at this. She handed the open package to her husband. There were 2 volumes of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice and posthumous papers of the Pickwick Club, both in English. Where did you get them? Daniel marveled, opening the beautifully illustrated volumes. Sebastian's former colleague sent them from abroad. The teacher smiled. At my request. Thank you. Thank you so much. Tina, pouring tears of gratitude and joy that all the horror she had experienced had been over, threw her arms around her favorite teacher. Tomorrow we will go to your parents, Daniel said firmly, and invite them to the wedding. Grandma forced me to borrow some money from her and pay for all the expenses, including buying tickets for your parents. She said that I have to fulfill the last will of a dying woman. Daniel laughed. She threatened again that she might die before we even had the real wedding. What about your parents? Tina wondered. Would they be able to come? No, he shook his head, they can't. But we all can go to them and have a wedding at the Austrian embassy. Mom is already preparing everything necessary, visas, tickets. All we need are copies of passports. We'll do it tomorrow. In about 2 months your family will arrive in the capital and we will go to Austria together. Yvonne, you're invited, too. If it weren't for you, Tina and I would never have met. But I don't even want to think about it. No objections. The boy shook his head, seeing that the teacher wanted to refuse. We're not going anywhere without you. Even my grandmother will go, she said for the last time. Daniel added quietly and made a serious face. Still, let me say something, Yvonne asked. Both Tina and Daniel nodded in unison, of course. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I'll definitely go, I promise. And Daniel, your grandmother is a wonderful person. I don't know her in person, but I realize that she is a wise, strong, and kind person. And she raised a wonderful grandson. I'd like to drink to her health, and to yours too. Let everything go smoothly in your life. I wish you to meet more good, honest, decent people in your life. Looking at you, I feel that I have not lived my life in vain. Yvonne expressed his feelings and wiped his eyes with a napkin. Unfortunately, he was not destined to visit Austria. Tina's favorite teacher died from a heart attack 2 weeks after their meeting. Grief-stricken Tina cried for 3 days in a row. But the wedding was on time. Everything was just as it was planned, solemn, lavish, and beautiful wedding. Only Tina's mother arrived from a distant village. Her father was no longer able to represent their family, and her grandmother flatly refused. She said, I'm too old to travel the world. But, nevertheless, everyone was happy and the event was amazing. The happy couple named their firstborn child Yvonne, in honor of the man who played a decisive role in their destiny, having once inspired a little shy village girl that everything in this life depends only on us.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.